Crownfall is a 2 to 4 player game where players take turns flicking their army of blinks at their opponent's blinks to try and knock them out of the battlefield. First, choose a smooth surface, such as a floor or tabletop, to be your battlefield, and set the boundaries of your arena, the edges of a table or lines on the ground. Then create a real or imaginary line to divide the battlefield in half and choose a side. This determines where you can place your army during the game. Next, take an even number of blinks and divide them in half between the players. If playing with more than 2 people, players will need to group up into 2 teams. Each team clusters their blinks together and then single-clicks any blink to swap between the 2 team colors. To muster an army, triple-click any blink in the cluster to turn it into a crown. All other blinks will become the army. Blinks will assign themselves one of 9 roles depending on how far apart they are from the crown blink. As you play, try and find a unique setup formation that creates your perfect strategic army. Finally, each team distributes their army throughout their side of the battlefield, making sure that no 2 blinks are touching. The game then begins with the starting player's turn. The goal of Crownfall is to reduce your opponent's crown to 0 health. Each turn, a player can perform up to 2 actions. These actions can either be a flick or a special power. Unless otherwise specified, a player cannot flick or activate the ability of the same blink more than once in the same turn. Flicking is the simpler of 2 actions. Generally speaking, players will flick blinks towards their opponent's blinks with the goal of knocking those blinks off the table, but can also flick them towards other parts of the battlefield to accomplish other strategic ends. If, after a flick, a blink connects to another blink, you must separate the 2 by 1 inch and rotate them so they are no longer aligned to each other. Some powers may affect this rule. If a blink falls off the table, or out of the bounds of the battlefield as a result of a flick, whether intentionally or by accident, that blink is dead, unless it is a crown or affected by a special ability. Set your dead blinks to the side, out of the battlefield's boundary, but within reach of the players. Players can also use an action to activate the power of one of their army blinks. Many roles have a power that can be activated with an action, but several roles have passive abilities which do not require an action. Now we'll go through the roles and their powers. The crown. Whenever it is knocked off the battlefield, double-click it to remove 1 health. Then place it back anywhere on your side of the battlefield. The knight. If the knight connects with another blink in your army, that blink may be stacked on top of the knight. That piece is now under the knight's protection. You can separate the 2 if you want to flick either, ending the protection. The wizard. After you flick the wizard blink, you can pick it up and return it to its original position as long as it didn't hit any other blinks. The jester. If the jester connects to an enemy blink, they remain connected, either until your opponent uses an action to disconnect them, or you flick the jester with the enemy blink still attached, after which they are disconnected. The assassin. You may use an action to place the assassin anywhere on the battlefield. The cleric. If the cleric connects to another blink, it will pass on a spinning white blessing. If a blink with a blessing is knocked off the battlefield, it may be returned to its side of the battlefield, then double-clicked to expend the blessing. The Necromancer. You can use your first action to take a dead blink from the outside of the battlefield and place it next to your Necromancer. Then use the second action to flick it once. Regardless of the result of that flick, the resurrected blink is then removed from play. The Giant. If you flick the Giant during your turn, on your opponent's next turn, you may hold the Giant down with your hand, rendering it immovable. The Cavalry. You may use both of your actions to flick the Cavalry. If you do this, you can flick it a 3rd time for free. You win the game of Crownfall by reducing your opponent's crown to 0 health. To reset your army and start a new game, cluster your blinks together and triple-click one of them to reset the cluster back to setup.